The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you. Mr. Speaker, yesterday the Prime Minister gave a speech, a depressing speech. He said that in his youth there was a lot of opportunity, but that the future for our young people would not be as good as his past had been. He said that young people need to make sacrifices. Sacrifices? That's what young people have been making for the last 10 years under the Liberals. The Liberals have doubled the cost of housing, they've taken away jobs, and they've created intergenerational debt. Young people have to sacrifice more. What do they have left to sacrifice? The Honourable Minister of Government Transformation. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. You know what young Canadians have sacrificed in the last election? They sacrificed a pessimistic, negative, critical vision of Canada from the Leader of the Official Opposition. They chose a serious leader, an ambitious government, Mr. Speaker, that is uniting the Canadian economy to create opportunity. We're talking about $215 billion for Canada's GDP. We're talking about major projects from one end of the country to the other. They're going to create great jobs for the future.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, apparently the minister didn't listen to the Prime Minister's speech last night when he said that young people are going to have to make sacrifices. They're going to have to sacrifice even more. That's after 10 years of the Liberals. And they forced 3 major sacrifices on our youth. They've made the cost of housing unaffordable. They've killed jobs with the worst jobs numbers in 30 years. And they've created intergenerational debt. Why not propose an affordable budget so that our young people can have an affordable life? The Honourable Minister. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And every day, here in this House, at every question period, the gulf between this career politician, the Leader of the Opposition, and an economist who has private sector experience like the Prime Minister gets wider and wider and more obvious for Canadians. What the Prime Minister said yesterday is that we're going to spend less to invest more, that we're going to have a transformational budget with the biggest capital investments in years to create jobs for young people from one end of the country to the other.
Speaker, yesterday the Prime Minister made a very depressing speech to Canada's youth. He said they would have to make more sacrifices. More sacrifices. After 10 Liberal years that doubled the cost of housing and drove out the possibility that youth could own their own home. After the sacrifice of their jobs, with the worst employment numbers since the 1990s. After the sacrifice of a lifelong of shouldering high debt. Young people need hope, jobs, and homes. Why won't the Prime Minister reverse his disastrous decade of policies so that we can restore that hope?
The Honourable Secretary of State for Labour.
Speaker, I had the honour of presenting red seals to 3 new apprentices of the IBEW in Local 230, Victoria, BC. Mr. Speaker, they're proud of what they accomplished. They're optimistic about the future because, Mr. Speaker, we are going to put them to work. Mr. Speaker, we're going to build homes. We're building major infrastructure projects in the national interest. Thousands of jobs, thousands of opportunities for apprenticeship. Mr. Speaker, while the Conservatives come to this House and talk Canada down every day, we're going to be supporting workers who are building Canada up.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
3 apprentices, Mr. Speaker. That does not account for the countless job losses, the highest jobless rate in 30 years outside of COVID caused by this government. Nor does it account for the doubling of housing costs so that 80% of young people believe they will never be able to afford a home. But yet the Prime Minister tells our youth that they have to sacrifice even more. All he offers is more costs, more debt, and more despair when Canadians actually need is more homes, more jobs, and more hope. Why won't he introduce an affordable budget for an affordable life?
The Honourable Secretary of State.
Every day, the Conservatives come to this House and talk down the Canadian economy. We are supporting our workers, Mr. Speaker. We are going to build, Mr. Speaker. Build bold. Build now with Canadian lumber, with Canadian steel, and Canadian unionized worker, Mr. Speaker. We are defending our workers, Mr. Speaker. We'll be there for Canada. I hope the Conservatives join us.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Speaker, apparently nobody over there watched the depressing, miserable, hopeless speech the Prime Minister gave to Canadian youth yesterday. He said that Canadian youth need to sacrifice more, Mr. Speaker, when in fact quite the opposite is true. Mr. Speaker, the youth of this country have sacrificed enough. They can't afford homes, they can't get jobs, and now they have a generational lifetime of debt to shoulder. What Canadian youth need is homes, jobs, and hope. Yesterday, I provided the Prime Minister with a plan to do it. Will he put that hopeful plan in his budget?
The Honourable Government House Leader.
The only person who's miserable when the Prime Minister speaks, Mr. Speaker, is the Leader of the Opposition. What the Prime Minister is talking about is spending less and investing more. Investing in what? In careers for young people, in building major national projects, in being a technology leader in the world. Today, with Premier Ford leading the world in small modular nuclear reactors. Mr. Speaker, the young people of this country are proud to be Canadians. They're proud to see a future from coast to coast to coast in this country. The young people of this country have a bright future.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
It is too bad that that minister didn't write the Prime Minister's speech yesterday, because it wouldn't have bored and depressed to tears all of those poor students stuck in that room. There he spoke about how they would have to sacrifice more and that it would take time to reverse all of the misery that has built up over the last 10 years. Mr. Speaker, young people want to have homes. They want to have jobs. They want to have hope. They want a budget that is affordable so they can have a life that is affordable. Will the Prime Minister introduce that budget so that Canadians can restore the promise of their country?
The Honourable Government House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, you can be sure we are going to introduce a budget. The question is whether the Leader of the Opposition is going to support that budget, because here's what that budget's going to do. It's going to give young people all over this country the ability to stand up and say, that's where my future lies, in Canada, in skilled trades, in technology, in the professions, in careers that are going to give me and my family hope, a home, a community, a job, a future, the best country in the world. Let's build Canada.
The Honourable Member for Saint-Jean. Mr. Speaker, with the budget coming up soon, the government has accused the opposition parties of playing political games, but they're going to have to explain how demanding funding for healthcare is playing political games. How is supporting seniors in the face of the cost of living crisis a political game? How is dealing with the housing crisis, access to home ownership, and infrastructure a political game? Our demands are directly connected to the needs of Quebecers. They're public, and they have not changed. If the government ignores those demands, well then, at the end of the day, who is playing political games?
L'Honourable Ministre.
The Honourable Minister of Culture and Canadian Identity. Mr. Speaker, the leader of the Bloc Québécois seems to be changing ideas like he changed his shirts after the elections. He said, we're ready to work with the government. We want to give them some time so that we can help Canadians and Quebecers. But now what are they saying? Before even having read the budget, Mr. Speaker, they're saying, well, listen, we've got our answer for the budget. And it's clear what they're doing. I think everyone would like to know what the Bloc Québécois' position is. Are they going to read the budget before they decide to vote for or against?
Le député de Saint.
The Honourable Member for Saint-Jean. Mr. Speaker, I'll tell you what looks like political games. It's when the Prime Minister doesn't want to work with others. It's when the Prime Minister meets with party leaders to discuss their expectations for the budget, but he already has a speech written for that evening where he ignores everything that the opposition leaders have suggested. Not a word about healthcare or seniors. No commitments to transfer funds unconditionally to Quebec for infrastructure or for social and community housing. Silence, nothing on the $840 million stolen from Quebecers to give election gifts to the rest of Canadians. Why is the Prime Minister playing political games? He's playing them instead of meeting the needs of Quebecers. The Honourable Minister. Mr. Speaker, the House Leader met with the Bloc Leader to talk about the budget. The Minister of Finance met with the Bloc Leader to talk about the budget. The Prime Minister met with the Bloc Leader to talk about the budget. I met with the leader of the Bloc Québécois to talk about the budget. But before the budget's even been made public, the Bloc Québécois said, oh, listen, we're not interested. We're not going to vote in favour. They're not going to vote in favour of measures that are going to help millions of Canadians save on their taxes, Mr. Speaker. They're not going to vote for a budget that's going to build hundreds of thousands of new homes. I think the Bloc's position is unacceptable. The Honourable Member for Berthier-Masquinongé. Mr. Speaker, the government leader says that if the budget doesn't pass, it's going to be the opposition's fault. The Minister of Finance has accused us of playing political games. But our demands have been public for a long time now, and it was the Prime Minister who's chosen to ignore them, and he didn't have any of them in his pre-budget speech last night. Mr. Speaker, this is a minority government. It should act like a minority government and make agreements if it wants the budget to pass. Why is it so complicated to just meet the needs of Quebecers? The Honourable Government House Leader. Mr. Speaker, Quebecers' needs are very, very, very well represented on this side of the House, with 44 members on this side of the House from Quebec. These are people who are active in their communities, who represent their constituents, who talk about their forests, who talk about their seniors, who talk about their young people, who want to build a prosperous future for all young Quebecers. And we are a Canada that is strong and united, Mr. Speaker. We have no lessons to take from the Bloc Québécois when it comes to the future of Quebec.
The Honourable Member for Sherwood Park, Fort Saskatchewan.
The Prime Minister told young Canadians that there would be more sacrifices in their future. Young people are already facing a bleak future because of Liberal policies, exploding housing and food prices, historic highs in unemployment. Mr. Speaker, past generations sacrificed to make life better for their children. But now young people are being told to sacrifice their future because of elite Liberal policies. Mr. Speaker, will Liberals stop breaking their promises and restore hope for the future of this country?
The Honourable Secretary of State for Financial Institutions.
Mr. Speaker, you know what youth of this country want? They want a leader that doesn't spin conspiracy theories, attack democratic institutions, and suggest other leaders be jailed. Mr. Speaker, on November 4th, we're going to table a generational budget. We're going to invest in Canada. We're going to build Canada. I suggest the leader opposite sacrifices ego. Put the rhetoric aside and help us build Canada. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Sherwood Park, Fort Saskatchewan.
Mr. Speaker, respectfully, that nonsense answer obviously had nothing to do with the question. And when we're talking about youth unemployment, I think it's time for the Liberals to sacrifice their tired talking points and actually get serious about addressing this problem. Now, last week we introduced the Conservative Youth Jobs Plan to unleash the economy, fix immigration, fix training, and build homes where the jobs are. So instead of preaching sacrifice, why don't the Liberals actually propose a youth jobs plan? Better yet, why don't they simply adopt ours?
The Honourable Secretary of State.
Mr. Speaker, while the Conservatives are in damage control mode, we're in build mode. On November 4th, we're going to table a generational budget. We're going to invest in Canada. We're going to build at a scale not seen since the Second World War. We're going to invest in infrastructure, national projects. Mr. Speaker, we believe in Canada. We will build Canada's economy and the strongest economy in the G7. I ask the party opposite to come out of the shadows, support our budget. Thank you.
The Honourable Member for Richmond Hill South.
Yesterday, this Liberal Prime Minister told a room full of students that they're going to have to make some sacrifices. Well, young people have already sacrificed enough over the last 10 years. They've sacrificed by paying skyrocketing food costs. They've sacrificed with an entire summer without jobs because Liberal job-killing policies have driven youth unemployment to recessionary levels. They've sacrificed the dream of home ownership because the Liberals created the worst housing crisis ever. And last month, rents were up another 4.8% nationally. Canadians shouldn't have to sacrifice for Liberal failures. When will the Liberals stop doubling down on the same failed policies, get spending under control so young Canadians can finally afford to buy a home?
The Honourable Minister of Jobs and Families.
Boy, Mr. Speaker, that speech really freaked out the Conservatives, didn't it? Because it was all about ambition. It was about investing in ourselves. It was about building major projects. It was about the project that Prime Minister Carney announced with Premier Ford, that the Prime Minister...
I don't think I even need to say it. I think everyone knows. The member may go ahead. Not from the top.
Mr. Speaker, that speech yesterday from the Prime Minister really freaked these Conservatives out because they saw the ambition in that speech. And not only did they see it in that speech, today, as the Prime Minister stood with the Premier investing in new nuclear to ensure the jobs of today and the future, they know that the youth...
The honourable member for Newmarket Aurora.
Yesterday, the Prime Minister told a room full of students that they're going to have to make sacrifices, but after 10 long years of failed Liberal policies they already have, they've sacrificed their dream of owning a home, sacrificed their dream of starting a family because they cannot afford it. They have watched food prices skyrocket, and housing starts in Toronto at a 30-year low. Canada has everything it needs to thrive, but it's failing because of their policies. Will the Liberals stop breaking their promises and get their spending out of control so young Canadians can finally afford to dream?
Honourable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, the youth in my riding are dreaming, and not only that, they're working, and they're entering the workforce in extraordinary ways. Let me talk about the young welder that I met at Thunder Bay Hydraulics just a few weeks ago, who approached me the other day and said that because of the programs that the province and the federal government work together on to ensure she had work-integrated learning, she was now a welder with that company. Mr. Speaker, we're investing in jobs, we're investing in youth. Every time we look across the aisle, these guys are voting against the interests of youth. It's very rich for them to talk about youth.
The honourable member for Brandon Souris.
Yesterday, the Prime Minister told a room full of students that they have to make sacrifices. Mr. Speaker, students and young people in this country have already sacrificed enough to these Liberals. They've sacrificed the dream of home ownership. They've paid the price at the pump and for the cost of food. They've spent summers without jobs. Now the Liberals get up and their big achievement is 3 new apprenticeship Red Seals? You gotta be kidding me. Canadians have sacrificed enough over the last 10 years. They shouldn't have to sacrifice more for these Liberal failures. Will the Liberals get their spending under control in the November 4th budget and restore the promise of hope for young Canadians?
The Honourable Minister of International Trade.
Canadians vividly remember, young Canadians vividly remember when the Leader of the Opposition, the Conservative leader, stood up and voted against removing interest off Canada's student loans, saving young Canadians thousands of dollars every year, Mr. Speaker. This new government will always stand up for young Canadians. Yesterday, the Prime Minister announced that we will double non-U.S. exports by $300 billion. That means thousands of new opportunities for young Canadians producing the goods that the world wants to buy. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Montmorency-Charlevoix. Mr. Speaker, yesterday the Prime Minister announced in front of a room full of students that they were going to have to make sacrifices. But they've been sacrificing for 10 years now, Mr. Speaker. They've sacrificed the dream of having a home. They're sacrificing too much of their own budget to pay for groceries, and last summer, many weren't even able to find a job. A simple question: will the Liberals finally stop breaking their promises? Will they rein in spending? And will they allow Canadians to buy groceries at a fair price and dream of being able to one day buy a house? The Honourable Minister of Government Transformation. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. While the Leader of the Opposition is on YouTube and spreading conspiracy theories attacking the RCMP and saying that his adversary should be in prison. I choose without hesitation a Prime Minister who is explaining to Canadians how we're building the strongest economy in the G7 by building projects from coast to coast to coast, by making life more affordable, for example, by cutting taxes for 22 million Canadians, by making housing more affordable. That's what we're doing on this side of the House. That's the difference between an opposition party that has a small vision for the country and an ambitious, serious government on this side. The Honourable Member from Montmorency-Charlevoix. We don't have a small vision for the country, Mr. Speaker. We have a fair vision for young people who can't afford homes, who are being hit hard by inflation, who are seeing grocery prices going up. This is having a real impact on their physical and mental health and their hope of one day having a bright future. Yesterday, again, the Prime Minister, in a depressing speech, asked young people to make sacrifices. When is this Liberal government going to stop crushing our young people under the weight of their poor management and allow them to have a better future? The Honourable Minister. Mr. Speaker, the ambition on this side of the House is ambition that is serious. We'll build the strongest economy in the G7. We'll free the power of the Canadian economy. We'll make the economy stronger by lowering taxes for 22 million Canadians, by cutting GST on new homes, by making housing more affordable across the country, by investing in building an unprecedented number of new homes in this country. That's the ambition that we have on this side of the House. That's what we're going to deliver for young Canadians. The Honourable Member for Repentigny. Mr. Speaker, Ottawa's just announced $2 billion to build a nuclear power plant in Ontario. For years now, Quebec has been offering to sell true clean electricity to Ontario, but Ontario and Doug Ford have turned that down. And today, the federal government announced that it's going to make Quebecers pay for a nuclear power plant in Ontario that's going to allow it to compete with Quebec's truly clean energy. Quebecers are losers 3 times over here. We're losing when it comes to the environment, when it comes to trade, and now we're losing our tax dollars. Is the government going to back down? The Honourable Minister of the Environment and Climate Change. Mr. Speaker, I want to be very clear that we are building a country for the future, and that's with clean energy. And as a member from Ontario, I can say that nuclear energy has helped us get away from coal-fired power plants. That means we have cleaner air for our kids. It's very important that we continue to work to have clean electricity across the country. We already have the cleanest electricity, and we are going to continue to do the hard work to improve that. The Honourable Member for Repentigny. Mr. Speaker, the federal government isn't happy with just making us pay to allow Ontario to compete with Hydro-Quebec. It goes even further than that, because if Ontario develops nuclear power, that means there's going to be an increase in radioactive waste. And what do you think they're going to do with it? Well, they're probably going to be storing it at Chalk River, as they're doing right now. That's on the banks of the Ottawa River, which is the main source of drinking water for millions of Quebecers. The federal government is making us pay hundreds of millions of dollars to put our drinking water at risk. Does the government really think that we're going to accept that? The Honourable Minister. Mr. Speaker, we should be very proud in this country that we have clean electricity from coast to coast to coast. It's 84% clean energy, and we're continuing to work with the provinces across the country, and we are going to continue to do the work that needs to be done with hydroelectricity in Quebec, and we'll continue to work with Newfoundland on hydroelectricity as well. But nuclear is part of that. Wind power is part of that. We're going to continue to do that work. It's important for our future.
The Honourable Member for North Island, Powell River.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister just told a room full of young Canadians that they're going to have to make sacrifices. Well, after 10 years of the Liberal government, they've already had to sacrifice the dream of owning a home. They've already had to sacrifice their modest expectations of living in a safe community. They've already had to sacrifice an economy where the cost of living is manageable and good-paying jobs are easy to find. So my question for the Prime Minister is, when he made these comments, what additional sacrifices for young Canadians did he have in mind?
Good job. Secretary of State for Sport.
What the leader of the Conservatives doesn't seem to get is that Canadians use hope and hard work and sacrifice every single day to build up our country and our communities. But when the failed former MP from Carleton lost his seat, Mr. Speaker, he didn't have to make any sacrifices or be accountable. He didn't even learn a lesson clearly, but when his constituents fired him, he should have maybe paused and reflected a little bit. But since he didn't lose his home in taxpayer-funded non-market housing, I guess that's why he continued to deny it to millions of Canadians, Mr. Speaker. Maybe that failed and flailing Conservative leader should join some students in a class, because it seems like 20 years in this House, after 20 years in this House, he can learn a thing or two about hard work.
Yeah. The honourable member for North Island, Cowell River.
I guess, Mr. Speaker, one of the things we also have to sacrifice are answers in question period. After 10 years of Liberal government, we've had a cost of living crisis. We've had an addictions crisis that's left 50,000 Canadians, mainly young Canadians, dead from drug overdoses. And now we have a growing youth jobs crisis, with youth unemployment surging to 14.7%, the highest level in 15 years. If young Canadians could barely afford to put a roof over their head and food on their table when they are working, how are they going to be able to afford it when they're out of a job?
Good job. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Prime Minister.
If we find it a little bit rich that the Conservative Party is going to stand up and talk about youth when they consistently vote against the measures that this government has introduced that actually matter to young Canadians in this country. They voted against budget measures that actually support young skilled trade workers. They voted against the Canada Child Benefit. They vote against national school food programs. They vote against programs that are ensuring dental programs, Canada Housing Benefit. We have a plan to build up this country. We have a plan to build major national projects. There is a bright and hopeful future for youth in this country, notwithstanding the fact that Conservatives don't want to join us in those measures to make it happen, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for York-Durham.
Well, Mr. Speaker, despite all these programs, the Prime Minister still went to students yesterday and gave them a message: you must sacrifice more. Well, the next generation has sacrificed enough. They've sacrificed the dream of home ownership. They've sacrificed the dream of starting a family. He might as well have said, let them eat cake. Well, then, if the next generation has sacrificed enough after 10 years, will the Prime Minister reverse course, get his spending under control so that the next generation of young Canadians can afford to feed themselves and own a home?
The Honourable Minister of International Trade.
Mr. Speaker, our new government is supporting young Canadians with the skills and opportunities they need to build their futures. That's why when the Prime Minister announced on campus just yesterday that we'll double Canada's non-U.S. exports over the next decade, it mattered. We're talking about 2/3 of our economy driven by international trade. It means millions of jobs and more careers in communities across Canada producing the goods that the world wants to buy. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Member for York-Durham.
The only thing this government is doubling is the debt that the next generation will have to pay. So-called generational investment, that is just generational debt and generational inequality. In fact, Habitat for Humanity now says 70% of Canadians say owning a home is impossible. And for those that rent, they saw a 5% increase year over year, Mr. Speaker. That is the result of Liberal policies. Will the Prime Minister sacrifice his policies rather than the future of the next generation?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Speaker, when we talk about making generational investments in our upcoming budget, it's because we believe on this side of the House that youth and young people are the drivers of our future economic growth, and we have a responsible plan to ensure that they have the skills and opportunities to succeed. It builds on the work that we're doing to support apprenticeships and Red Seal trades, co-ops, and access to post-secondary education and training. But most importantly, we're creating thousands of new career-starting jobs, investing in major projects, and making it more affordable for young people to buy a home. Housing starts, construction, investment, wages are up. This is part of our plan. We've got more to do.
The honourable member for Kamloops, Thompson, Nicola.
Mr. Speaker, the Public Safety Minister's job is to keep Canadians safe. Yet just today we learned that 32,000 foreign nationals have warrants pending their deportation. That means they are lost. They are wanted. 32,000 people, and the minister doesn't know where they are. We have him on secret recording saying his gun confiscation won't work. We have crime absolutely skyrocketing, and now he's lost 32,000 foreign nationals. So the question is this, Mr. Speaker: when will the Prime Minister fire this public safety minister for failing to keep Canadians safe?
The Honourable Minister of Public Safety.
Mr. Speaker, the safety and security of Canadians is the first and most primary responsibility of this government. That's what we've taken very important measures in order to ensure the safety and security of Canadians, including having the highest levels of removals in a decade. Over 20,000 people will be removed from Canada for being here improperly, Mr. Speaker. That's what we introduced, bail reform and sentencing reform just this afternoon. That's what we have, Bill C-12, that's going through the House. I encourage the party opposition to support these measures in order to keep Canadians even more safer, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Spadina Harbourfront.
Speaker, this government was elected with a decisive mandate to keep violent repeat offenders off our streets. While the Leader of the Opposition was attacking the brave men and women of the RCMP, calling them despicable, the Minister of Justice was working with provinces, territories, and law enforcement to develop solutions-focused bail and sentencing reforms. Today, the Minister has tabled Bill C-14, the Bail and Sentencing Reform Act. Can the Minister explain how this bill will ensure the safety of our communities and keep dangerous offenders behind bars?
The Honourable Minister of Justice.
Mr. Speaker, there is not a less credible voice when it comes to criminal justice reform than the Leader of the Opposition. In the past few weeks, he has called the RCMP despicable. He has attacked Crown prosecutors, and he has suggested his political opponents should be jailed. The legislation we tabled today will make it harder to get bail for violent repeat offenders and will strengthen sentence for serious criminals. Mr. Speaker, criminal justice reform demands a conversation that would engage adults in the rooms. The Conservatives have a leadership review coming up. I invite them to choose one.
The honourable member for Central Newfoundland.
Some NL residents finding it hard to survive as grocery prices continue to rise. That's the headline from CBC today. They go on to say that the price of food in Newfoundland and Labrador is up 4% since last September. Beef leads the way, up 20%. This Liberal Prime Minister said he would be judged by the prices Canadians pay at the grocery store. So will he get his inflationary deficits under control so that Canadians can afford to put food on the table? That's a good question.
The Honourable Minister of Fisheries and Oceans.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I want to remind my opposition colleague from Newfoundland and Labrador that Newfoundland and Labrador was the first province in Canada to sign on to the Food School program. The Conservative Party was the first party in Canada to not vote for that program. Newfoundlanders and Labradorians value this program. Moms, parents, school educators know what this program means. This is affordability, just as the suite of other programs are affordability, and this member voted against every one of them.
The honourable member for Central Newfoundland.
Mr. Speaker, could you have a more heartless response than from the regional minister from Newfoundland and Labrador, no less, where people are known to have a good heart? That minister knows full well that the school lunch program that they created is garbage. It hasn't fed one child in Canada. Mr. Speaker, she also knows that her hidden taxes from the
Can the member continue, please?
Mr. Speaker, could you have a more heartless response than from the regional minister from Newfoundland and Labrador, no less, where folks are known to have a good heart? That minister knows full well that that school lunch program that they created hasn't fed one Canadian child. And Mr. Speaker...
Time's up. Time's up. Time's up. I'm sorry. The Honourable Minister of Fisheries and Oceans.
Mr. Speaker, while the colleague from Newfoundland and Labrador in the opposition wants to talk down programs, humiliate Newfoundlanders and Labradorians and all Canadians, I will reassure Canadians the school food program is feeding children. It's saving families up to $800 a year. This is policies that work. I will always stand for Newfoundlanders and Labradorians and Canadians.
The honourable member for Yorkton Melville.
Parents are struggling to secure healthy food for their families because of this Liberal government's out-of-control spending, skyrocketing food inflation up again 4%. Liberal food taxes and regulations don't show up on their receipts, but Canadians feel them every time they shop for groceries. The Prime Minister said he would be judged by the prices Canadians pay at the grocery store. If he's truly the astute economist he claims he is, why isn't he getting his inflationary deficits and hidden grocery taxes under control so Canadians can afford to feed their families?
Honourable Minister of Jobs and Families.
Well, Mr. Speaker, here we go again with the imaginary taxes. They don't show up on receipts because they're not actually there. So Canadians know that. They know how to read a receipt, Mr. Speaker. But just picking up on the previous question, I just want to remind people about how much good this school nutrition program is doing all across Canada, including, as my colleague mentioned, providing dignity to families all across this country so that their kids can get good nutrition in school, feeding healthy brains, and it's saving families about $800 a year. Mr. Speaker, as a former lunchroom monitor, there's nothing more painful than watching a child who doesn't have a lunch, whether they...
The honourable member for Elgin, St. Thomas, London South.
Mr. Speaker, the retooling of the Kami plant in Ingersoll was supposed to be a great success. Taxpayers kicked in hundreds of millions of dollars. The finance minister said this was, quote, proof that Canada's auto sector is here for the long term. Now 1,200 of the plant's hardworking employees, many of them in St. Thomas, Elgin, and London, are out of work. This is all despite the Prime Minister pledging a deal with Trump by July to protect Canadian auto jobs. Today, he says there won't be a deal at all. Auto workers' lives and livelihoods were on the line. Why did the Prime Minister dupe them?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Industry.
Monsieur le Président, nous comprenons...
Mr. Speaker, we all understand that the Canadian and Ontarian auto sector is crucial. We want it to stay afloat. We are doing all we can to help auto industry workers. What is more, the president of Unifor said recently, I believe yesterday, that the industry minister is doing an exceptional job. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
For Elgin, St. Thomas, London South.
If this is what the Liberals see as an exceptional job, I'd hate to see what they view as poor work. 3,000 workers in Brampton, 1,200 in Ingersoll, 700 in Oshawa, 300 in Sainte-Thérèse, Quebec. That is the Liberal record in just a few weeks, Mr. Speaker. The Prime Minister promised he'd protect auto jobs. I wish he had been more honest that he meant in the United States. The Liberals have handed out billions of dollars in subsidies with no job guarantees for Canadian workers. Last night, the Prime Minister told Canadians we'd have to make sacrifices. We already are, and it's not clear for what. When will he do his job and stop selling out Canadian workers?
The Honourable Secretary of State for Labour.
Mr. Speaker, there's no doubt that the U.S. has changed their trading relationship with the world, and that's having an impact on the auto sector. The Minister of Industry is out fighting for workers. She has summoned Stellantis and GM here to hold them accountable. Mr. Speaker, we're going to do whatever it takes to protect workers, defend our auto sector, bring production back to Canada. Mr. Speaker, because Canadian auto workers are the best in the world, and we're going to fight for them every single day. Every single day.
The Honourable Member for Charlebourg-Haut-Saint-Charles. Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister promised to negotiate a win to manage Donald Trump and to get a deal signed with the U.S. before July 21st, but he did the opposite. He failed auto industry workers in Canada and Quebec. PACCAR in Sainte-Thérèse has just laid off 300 employees. That brings it to a total of 725 employees since the beginning of the year when the PM started negotiating with Washington. Now the Prime Minister is telling young Canadians that they will need to make sacrifices. Should young Quebecers really have to make sacrifices to please Washington? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Industry. Mr. Speaker, my colleague has just mentioned the example of PACCAR. I would like to note that PACCAR's decision is incomprehensible. We do not understand why the U.S. administration is tariffing trucks, including PACCAR trucks. This just shows how unpredictable the U.S. administration is. We should keep a cool head here in Canada. We will negotiate a good deal. The honourable member for Charlesbourg-Saint-Charles. Mr. Speaker, I remember back in the campaign when Liberal candidates were saying, elbows up to Donald Trump, we'll fix it. Don't worry. I manage the Bank of Canada and the Bank of England, I'll manage this. But what are we witnessing? Job losses in the auto sector. 3,000 from Stellantis, 725 Quebec auto workers. Now there's over 10,000 auto workers in Quebec, but they're all at risk because elbows up didn't fix the problem. When will the problem be fixed? The Honourable Minister for Canada-US Trade. Mr. Speaker, I am not surprised that my colleague remembers the last electoral campaign because during it, Canadians chose a government that was not only ready to defend Canadian industry, but also to negotiate with the U.S. government to score a deal that would benefit Canadian workers and businesses. Canadians chose in the election. They knew well that the Conservative Party would be entirely unable to stand up to the U.S. government and defend the interests of Canadian workers and businesses. We are ready for the challenge.
Wellington, Halton Hills North.
Mr. Speaker, last election, during the debate, the Prime Minister was asked to name the biggest threat to the security of Canada. He answered in one word, China. And now the Foreign Affairs Minister is talking about a strategic partnership with Beijing, including security. These two things seem contradictory. Can the Minister reconcile these two things, or is this another example of the Prime Minister saying one thing during the election and doing another after?
The Honourable Minister of Foreign Affairs.
Mr. Speaker, I appreciate the question of my honourable colleague. Let me reiterate that the public safety and security of Canadians, regardless of the time and place, is always top of mind for our government, including in our diplomatic relationships. At the same time, Canada will continue to become the strongest economy in the G7, and the way we do that, Mr. Speaker, is to diversify our supply chains while making sure we protect our citizens at home. Thank you.
Honourable member for Wellington, Halton Hills North.
Mr. Speaker, another question about what the Prime Minister called the biggest threat to the security of Canada, foreign interference. Last election, some candidates were vetoed for interference and others were targeted, and millions of Canadians continue to live in fear because of threats from foreign interference. The Foreign Interference Transparency Registry was passed into law last year. The government said it would take 12 months to implement. 16 months have passed and still no registry. So when will it be up and running, and when will the commissioner be appointed?
Right on.
The Honourable Minister of Public Safety.
Mr. Speaker, I appreciate the opportunity to answer this very important question, Mr. Speaker. I look forward to bringing forth the name to the leaders of the opposition so that we can have consensus on the commissioner, and I assure the member opposite that we'll have the commission up and running by the end of the year.
Good.
The honourable member for Argenteuil-la-Petite-Nation. Mr. Speaker, promise made, promise kept. The Minister of Justice has just tabled Bill C-14, which will strengthen bail and sentencing provisions. This will make it so that no sex offender will be able to serve out their sentence at home. Developed in collaboration with provinces, territories, and law enforcement, Bill C-14 will center victims within the justice system. Could the Justice Minister explain how this bill will protect the public while holding violent reoffenders fully responsible? The Honourable Minister of Justice. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would like to thank my colleague for his very important question. Our government is working to ensure the safety of Canadians. This bill will create stronger sentences for violent reoffenders and will end sentences served at home by sex offenders. We will also make jail time the default for violent reoffenders. I worked with provinces, territories, and law enforcement. I look forward now to working with all the members to get this bill passed.
Sturgeon River.
Mr. Speaker, never before has a government spent so much and delivered so little. The latest example, the CRA. Under these Liberals, the CRA's budget increased by a staggering 70%, yet according to the Auditor General, the CRA has failed to meet its service standard a shocking 95% of the time. So how is it possible that every time the Liberals spend more, Canadians get less?
The Honourable Secretary of State for Financial Institutions.
Thank you for the question, Mr. Speaker. We accept the Auditor General's report, and we will learn from that. But let me be very clear. There was 167 calls made by the Auditor General. The CRA has made 100,000 calls, and we have upwards of 90% calls answered accurately. We will improve, we will continue to learn, but Mr. Speaker, we will continue to provide a CRA that is responsive to Canadians. Thank you.
The Honourable Member for St. Albert, Sturgeon River.
Mr. Speaker, not only did the CRA fail to meet its service standard 95% of the time, last year 8.6 million calls to the CRA went unanswered, and if you were lucky enough to get through, the CRA gave wrong information 83% of the time. And what is the Liberal solution? Increase the CRA's budget even more. You can't make this stuff up. Have these Liberals learned absolutely nothing after 10 years of failure?
The Honourable Secretary of State.
Mr. Speaker, I'm right here. Canadians deserve timely and accurate service from the CRA. There's no question about that. But, Mr. Speaker, we have good news. We have good news. We've instituted a 100-day plan. Service levels and access are up. We're upwards of 83% of calls answered within 15 minutes. Mr. Speaker, we are laser focused on the CRA delivering good service for Canadians, and that is what we are going to do. Thank you.
Member for Haliburton, Kawartha Lakes.
Speaker, auditors report that over 130 valuable Indigenous artworks have vanished from a federal collection overseen by the Minister of Crown Indigenous Relations. Security was so weak, the theft went undetected, and the department has no plan to recover the missing art, yet they continue to buy new pieces. The entire collection is worth over $14 million and includes cultural treasures. How can the minister explain this blatant mismanagement, and why is the Liberal plan just to spend more money and ignore the crime?
The Honourable Minister of...
Thank you.
Relations.
Speaker, we are working with our partners to address the issue, and I'd be happy to work with my colleagues on the other side as well. Thank you.
The Honourable Member for South Shore St. Margaret's.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, fishing is the economic engine of my community in South Shore St. Margaret's, but many of the people in my riding are concerned about the conservation of lobster and the risks of the industry posed by illegal fishing. The fisheries officers on the front lines are doing everything they can, but it appears that illegal fishing persists. Can the minister please tell me what she's been doing to combat illegal fishing, and has her plan been working?
Honourable Minister of Fisheries and Oceans.
Mr. Speaker, illegal fishing is unlawful. It threatens conservation, impacts the livelihood of people in coastal communities, and that's why we've strengthened enforcement, added more patrols on the water and at wharfs, and we're working with enforcement partners. This summer in southwest Nova Scotia, fisheries officers seized vessels and traps. They returned thousands of lobsters to the ocean, stopped black market sales, including 200 crates of lobster seized last week. Our plan is delivering results, and I will do everything I can to keep fisheries safe and regulated.
The Honourable Member for Lévis-Lotbinière. Mr. Speaker, inflation was 3.3% in Quebec in September. Why? Hidden taxes like the industrial carbon tax, the food packaging tax, and the clean fuel regulations. These taxes will fritter away $9 billion of real GDP by 2030. Mr. Speaker, will the former governor of the Bank of Canada now preside over the bankruptcy of Canada? The Honourable Government House Leader. Mr. Speaker, every time that member gets up, it's at least an 8 out of 10 question. Despite what my honourable colleague is shouting about, I can assure the House that Canada's finances are the best in the G7. We have the fiscal room to invest in the future of our country and our young people. My colleague should join us to vote in favor of the budget that will be tabled November 4th.
Mr. Speaker, not only is the Prime Minister planning to cut women and gender equality by as much as 81%, the Canadian Centre for Policy Alternatives just revealed that 59% of planned jobs cuts to the public service will impact women. Mr. Speaker, if the Prime Minister wants to regain the trust of women after forcing flight attendants back to unpaid work at Air Canada, why doesn't he stop these devastating job cuts?
Secrétaire parlementaire des femmes et...
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary for the Minister of Women and Gender Equality. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. That is why we are so focused on the economy. We don't talk enough about this, but we have a feminist vision. When the economy is going well, the status of women improves. This is important for building our society. Our government has invested more than any other in protecting women and LGBTQ+ communities. We will continue along this path. We will continue to keep our promises.
The Honourable Member for Saanich Gulf Islands.
Mr. Speaker, tomorrow is the 80th anniversary of the creation of the United Nations. Canada has an enviable reputation, but it's from long ago, when we were leaders in fighting for human rights, leaders in peacekeeping. I'd like to ask the Honourable Minister for Foreign Affairs, if Canada is rethinking our current position, will we continue to ignore the work of the Treaty for the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons, or will we again make efforts to be a country known for peacekeeping and ending the threat of nuclear war?
The Honourable Minister of Foreign Affairs.
Mr. Speaker, Canada believes in a world free of nuclear weapons, and the current arsenals around the world remain far too large. Deterrence is fundamental, and we share the concerns of the honourable member about the unacceptable slow pace of disarmament. We all share a responsibility to protect against these threats, including through the Comprehensive Nuclear Test Ban Treaty. At the United Nations recently, I spoke about the importance of multilateralism. It is collective action that will get us through these times, including through the challenge.
Et c'est la fin de la période des questions.
This concludes question period.
Période des